Welcome back into Live Now. I'm Austin Westfall. Well, you've seen these images quite a bit. This is the military installations that were hit by U.S. forces last month. And here's some photos of the Situation Room while those strikes were taking place. A new U.S. assessment has found that those strikes in June mostly destroyed one of 3 targeted Iranian nuclear sites, but the other 2 were not as badly damaged. NBC News reporting this on Thursday, citing current and former U.S. officials. The report said that U.S. officials believe the attack on Iran's Fordow facility was successful in setting back enrichment capabilities by as much as 2 years, citing, again, 2 current officials. President Trump, though, is pushing back on that report, saying all 3 sites were destroyed. National security analyst and retired Marine intelligence officer, host of the Strat podcast, Hal Kempfer, still here with me. Hal, here's what President Trump said on Truth Social. He responded by saying all 3 nuclear sites in Iran were completely destroyed and or obliterated. It would take years to bring them back into service, and if Iran wanted to do so, they would be much better off starting anew in 3 different locations prior to those sites being obliterated, should they decide to do so. Thank you for your attention to this matter, he writes. Okay, Hal. The White House says completely destroyed. Credible news reports say otherwise. Why does this matter? What's the difference between an Iran nuclear program that took a partial hit versus complete destruction?
Well, Austin, the big issue there is if they're completely destroyed, the idea is they're destroyed to a point where it'd be almost impossible to rebuild them. In that situation, according to what was reported, only one, Fordow, which was at really deep, I think it was like, 300 meters deep, or 300, I think it was 300 meters deep. Anyway, facility was the one that was hit with those GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator bombs that were dropped from B-2 bombers. Those things went in, burrowed deep into the earth. You also saw where they actually did something right out of Star Wars, where they blew the top off of one of the ventilator shafts, and the missiles actually went in to the ventilator shafts to get further down to cause more destruction. That one, they're saying, could take a couple of years or more to rebuild. The other 2 were hit with Tomahawk missiles, and as someone who used to control a variety of ordnance that we would bring in with airstrikes and other ways, I'm a big fan of Tomahawk missiles, but the Tomahawk missiles don't do the same things that the GBU-57s did. So they destroyed everything on the surface, all the buildings, all the facilities out there. And I'm sure there was some destruction of whatever was underneath them, but nothing to the extent of what you saw at the Fordow facility. Those 2 facilities were destroyed, but according to this report, they think that within a couple, maybe a few months, that they could rebuild those facilities and get them back in operation again. And it gets kind of to the semantics of the word obliterate. Obliterate is not a military term. It was a term that was kind of thrown out there to try and maybe express the level of destruction on these facilities. But now, completely destroyed is a military term. You can say something was completely destroyed. But even if it's completely destroyed, doesn't mean that at some point in the future they couldn't rebuild whatever's there. It's just how much resources, time, energy, money they want to put towards it. So yeah, I mean, the report certainly has a certain air about it, which says that does make sense. But then again, I don't disagree with the point that was made by the White House, which is, why would you build it there? Why don't you just, if you're going to rebuild these things, build them somewhere else? With that said, we could also go in and destroy those facilities too if we want to. So, but it would make more sense to build them someplace other than where they were previously.
So, Hal, the Pentagon is dismissing the report. The strikes happened almost a month ago, by the way. Why is it so hard to put this story to bed? Why are we still sitting here nearly a month later discussing how much damage was done?
Well, 2 things. Number one is because stories like this keep popping up. This is not the first time that there's been a dispute on the amount of destruction. I have to tell you, it's been interesting for me as a military intelligence officer, retired. But for many years, I would discuss things like battle damage assessment. And for 99.999% of the population, that meant absolutely nothing. Now that's become a normal course of discussion, but it gets into the battle damage assessment. How badly did we impact those sites? And that drives where do we need to go in terms of our negotiations with Iran on their nuclear facilities. What does Iran have? What do they still have as a capability that's sort of on the table, shall we say? Dare I use the term, a card that they can play in the negotiations? That makes a lot of difference. That makes a lot of difference. It's here now, present. It's not a month ago. It's what we're doing from here forward. And so that's why this story keeps coming up over and over again.
So, where do Iran nuclear negotiations stand? Are meetings still taking place?
There's communication. There are meetings. I don't know if they're really planned hard. I think you're going to see a lot of impetus toward meeting very soon because the provisions under JCPOA, the multinational agreement that the U.S. pulled out of during President Trump's first term on monitoring using the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, to actually look at those sites, those nuclear sites in Iran. That thing has hit its deadline. The Iranians are in non-compliance. The snapback provisions of where they were before with sanctions are poised to kick in, and that puts phenomenal pressure on Iran to come to some sort of agreement, some sort of deal with this. So with that said, yeah, not a lot of there is some discussion, not a ton of discussion right now, but I anticipate that going forward we're going to see a lot of discussion happen very quickly, and we'll see if they are. We've drawn a red line. We have said they can have no enrichment capability, zero. And that's something that Iran has drawn a red line and said, well, no, we want enrichment capability. And that's why it goes back to the story. Do they have any enrichment capability still incumbent, or did we effectively destroy that capability and they're going to have to rebuild it anew? That's where all these things kind of tie together.
We're looking at file footage of Ayatollah Khamenei. Hal, back when the strikes happened, and in the days following the strikes, we didn't hear a lot from him. In fact, we were wondering where he was. Now that it's been nearly a month since the strikes, has he resurfaced? Do we know where Khamenei is?
Austin, that's actually an interesting choice of terms, resurfaced. That's probably the most accurate way of describing what happened. He was deep underground, hunkered down from everything that we have, and he has technically resurfaced, if you will, a couple of times. It's not entirely clear how long he was on the surface and then how quickly he got back under the surface. But he actually he was, there was some speculation that he might have been seriously injured or killed in some of the strikes. As far as we can tell, that didn't happen. Although it does appear that the president of Iran was injured in one of the strikes, an Israeli strike. The extent of his injuries is still a little bit for debate. It doesn't sound like he was permanently, seriously disabled from it, but he was seriously injured. And I would point out that if the president of Iran was seriously injured, I think it was a leg injury. It kind of makes me wonder about the rest of his security detail or others around him, because apparently he was escaping where he was into a underground facility, and that happened, which kind of tells me that if there was anybody behind him, and there would normally be at least security personnel behind him, that their injuries might have been much more serious, if not fatal, with that, which gives you an idea of just how much damage and how effective those Israeli airstrikes were in the certainly in the opening days of the 12-day war.